Wow. Thank you. Thank you to Mike. Thank you to all my friends at Nikon. Thank you to all of you sitting here who are taking the time to grab a seat and learn a little bit. And thanks to everybody watching on the live stream. My name is Rod Marr. I'm a Seattle-based sports photographer. I've been using Nikon equipment, cameras, lenses, flashes for as long as I can remember. I live and die using Nikon equipment. It makes me a better photographer, so that makes me especially grateful to be here on the stage today. We all had dreams of what we wanted to be when we grew up, right? Right? We all did. We knew what we wanted to be growing up. I was 6 years old, a Chinese American kid growing up in Seattle, and I wanted to play in the NBA. I was going to be the first Asian American kid in the NBA. As you can probably tell, there were some things that limited my path to the NBA. My lack of jumper, my lack of foot speed, my inability to jump high, and my relative height. So I had another dream, and my next dream was I wanted to be a NASA astronaut. Okay? But I'm terrible at math, terrible at science, and scared of heights. And so usually when I come and I get to do a presentation like this, I get to tell people that I have my dream job. And this is the first time I've ever spoken where a person spoke before me who had my dream job. And that was a NASA astronaut who presented yesterday. When we talk about sports photography, we always think first of action photos, right? Action photos, peak action. Photos that are taken and captured at 1,000th of a second minimum, because we want to freeze that action. I live my life at 1,000th of a second. So if I get it, I'm really excited. But I'll tell you what, in an NFL game, I will shoot 3,500 images, trying to make one great photo every time I go out. I don't get 3,500 great images. If I try and get one, and I maybe get 50 really good ones I like, then that's a great day. So when we talk about peak images, peak action, we're talking about moments like that. Or Doug Baldwin catching a one-handed pass in 8-degree weather in Minnesota. This is the Nikon 200 to 400 millimeter lens, which has just been replaced by a lens that Nikon introduced this week, which is the 180 millimeter to 400 millimeter. I can't wait to bring that one out to a game. Peak action doesn't mean we always have to use the longest lens. We can shoot with a 70 to 200 and get a photo like this. So we have action photography. When we talk about sports, peak action. But what happens if you've ever watched sports photographers at a game and the play ends, and what do we do? What does everybody do as soon as the play ends? Yes. She's got it right. You look down at your camera to see what you got. But guess what? There's still things going on, right? We call this chimping. And it was a term, I'm going to say, that it was invented by a friend of mine at the US Open who was watching photographers. You photograph tennis. We all go this way. We all go this way. We go this way. We go this way. The play ends, and everybody looks down at their screen, okay? Don't stop shooting. Don't stop looking. Find the reaction photos. Find the reaction photos, because those are storytelling as well. And isn't the essence of photography telling stories? So we don't want to stop when we get past the play. We want to see the reaction, because sports is a human endeavor. And it's amazing the kinds of things you'll see. And it doesn't have to be the NFL. It doesn't have to be the UFC. It can be little kids, right? Playing t-ball or soccer, or at the high school that your kids go to or that you volunteer photograph for. There's always moments, and we don't want to miss those moments because we're looking at our back screen. Because here's what the fine people at Nikon taught me. Whether or not I look at the back screen doesn't change the photo. Okay, I either got it or I didn't. I got it in focus or I got it out of focus. The ref blocked me or he didn't block me. It's still there. So keep shooting. This is Earl Thomas. I have a friend I met here from Houston. He's sitting somewhere out here, and he said, oh, you guys played Houston, and that's Deshaun Watson. Just threw an interception to Earl Thomas. So we still, if we keep shooting and we keep seeing through the plays, we can get action of Earl running and reaction of Deshaun Watson, who just threw the interception. Okay? So when we keep shooting for reaction, then we get jubilation, we get those moments. We don't miss them. We want to keep shooting, keep seeing. And when we can all put that together, we find the best moments in sports. Okay, this is in the locker room. It's just a quiet moment. I'm still trying to see, still trying to capture, I'm trying to document the experience of our football team. I'm grateful enough and lucky enough and fortunate enough to work for a football coach who said, show our fans, we can't bring them everywhere. It's your job to show them what we do. So that's what I do in my job. And so sometimes if you keep shooting, those moments happen, and all of a sudden you get something like a helmet flying off and you can see his face. Or a sack and a fumble. Or 6 or 7 players all celebrating at once. So now let's talk about some of the things that we can do to make our own sports photography better, right? Because I'm fortunate enough to photograph at the NFL level, but some of you are photographing in colleges, some of you are photographing in high schools, in little leagues, or your kids' games, and you know, that's why you're here. You're here to look at the cameras and look at the lenses and how can I get better? So if we're going to talk about some tips for sports photography success, the first one is obviously be sharp, right? No one wants to look at an out of focus photograph. And I shoot plenty of out of focus photographs. My editor will tell you. I will text my editor in the middle of a game and I'll say, did we get that? And if we did, she says, yes, we got it. And if we didn't, she says, no, you missed it. But we always want to make sure that our pictures are in focus. And how do we do that? First thing is shutter speed, right? We want to have a shutter speed that's fast enough to freeze the action. And we're lucky enough to work in a digital age where high ISO doesn't matter anymore because the new cameras, the D5, the D800, the D850, the 7500, they can all shoot comfortably into ISOs that back, and I'm proud enough to admit that I used to shoot film, were unthinkable 20 years ago. Unthinkable. Old-time photo editors, the kind that smoked cigarettes and drank at the desk, they would tell you this. And there was a photo editor at the AP when I was first starting out, and he looked at me and said, 2 faces in a ball, kid, 2 faces in a ball. You do that and you'll be fine. And so that was the first rule of sports photography. Make sure you get 2 faces in a ball, because if you get 2 faces and a ball in a photograph, chances are it's compelling. But as we talked about with reaction, sometimes you don't need the ball. Sometimes you want the faces, because the faces tell the story, right? The faces tell the story. When you can line it up right, then you get faces behind the peak action as well. And so now you don't have 2 faces in a ball, you have a multitude of faces. There's another saying is the tighter the better. So sometimes you want to take a chance and you want to get the longest lens you can. And if it's only a 200 millimeter lens, that's fine. You can still get close with a 200 millimeter lens. If you're shooting soccer, be by the goal. If you're shooting baseball or t-ball, be by the batter's box. If you're shooting basketball, be under the basket. You can do a lot with 200 millimeters. You can do a lot with 80 millimeters. Okay? I'm fortunate enough that I get to work with really long lenses, but the reason I get to work with long lenses is because guys like Jimmy Graham are 6'8", 240, and I don't want to be 200 millimeters close to him when he's catching the ball, right? I want to be 600 millimeters away from him. One of my first mentors in photography, when I worked back at newspapers, said every photo has to tell a story. We talked about that earlier, okay? We want to make sure that our photos tell stories, because otherwise it's a guy jumping or a guy throwing or a guy catching. So sometimes what we need to do is we want to set the scene, because that tells the reader or the viewer a little bit more about the game, about the environment. When Corey talked about establishing shots for his home videos, right? Establishing shots. So sometimes we want to think about where the game's being played. This is Pyro before a Seahawks introduction. This is a game in Green Bay, Wisconsin, where I was really frustrated because it was snowing so hard and the cameras are so good. Who's ever tried to photograph outside in the past couple of years with falling, blowing snow? Do you know what happens? Nikon's autofocus is so good, it will focus on snowflakes. Yes, you're right, it focuses on snowflakes. And it's really cool the first time you do it, because you've got this really cool picture of in-focus snow with out-of-focus players, okay? But the third and fifth time you do it, you're really annoyed because now you're just missing the game. So what I did was, how do I tell the story of the blowing snow? And what I did was, got a little looser, got a little wider, okay? We still know they're playing football, but now we see the snow. Storytelling images. This is when one of our players got hurt, unfortunately, in the preseason, and it was a really moving moment because all the rest of our players came onto the field and knelt, like a high school game, like you would see in a Friday Night Lights game in Texas or in Indiana or in Ohio. And it was that feeling of team. And so with a photo like this, where I shoot it a little bit looser because we don't want to just concentrate on an injury or someone's anguish, but I was thinking, how can I best tell the story of this teamwork, of this unity? And it became one of the most powerful pictures of our season. And then, of course, you're fortunate enough to win a Super Bowl, right? And then your coach gets bathed in the Gatorade, and it's the coolest thing ever. And I was fortunate enough to be with the Seahawks when we won the Super Bowl. Sports, though, is fickle, 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 because 1 year later, we lost on almost the final play of the Super Bowl. And so, two pictures, same team, 365 days apart, both storytelling, okay? The next thing we want to talk about is backgrounds. Backgrounds matter. Backgrounds matter, okay? So that's kind of if action and peak action and two faces and a ball are 100 level sports photography, okay? 200 level sports photography is, let's make sure, just as when we shoot portraits, that our backgrounds are nice. Does that make sense? We want our backgrounds to be nice, because we've all seen the picture, a portrait, and someone has a lamp sticking out of their head or a tree. In sports photography, the long lenses, the 180 to 400, the 400 2.8, the 500 f4, the 600, they will help us compress and clean up backgrounds. But still, as photographers, we want to make sure that we are not seeing just the first layer, but the second layer beyond that as well. So this picture of Doug Baldwin catching a ball at the Meadowlands against the Giants, and at the 100 level, that's a successful picture. The pass is coming in, it's not quite in his hands, we can see his face, his eyes, the ball's just about to hit his blue and green gloves, and that's a pretty cool picture. Except there's some sort of field trip going on behind the play. Okay, and all you can see is him catching the ball, and all I can see is a guy in a white hat who looks like he might be at a golf tournament. Okay, he's at least looking at the play. We have a white post. Why? I don't know where there's a white post. We have two guys who are watching like a rerun of Friends on the big screen. You see those two guys in the blue hat. And so to me, this photo doesn't work. So we want to make sure that our backgrounds are great. We want to make sure they're clean. And if they're not clean, we want to make sure that our backgrounds help tell a story. So I work in Seattle, CenturyLink Field. Okay, so now we have a play where Doug Baldwin, same player, kind of peak action, he's jumping over a defender. Okay, but now I have fans, I have our colors, I have our field, and I have our logo. So the background is a little bit better, okay? It's cleaner. Does that make sense? Sometimes when you're photographing just inside the end zone, you worry because when that play goes to the corner, the background is going to be busy. And you can see that there's all these people behind, but as he flips over, you can kind of see the faces and the concern. And as a matter of fact, the guy in the blazer there at right is one of our team doctors. And he is watching this play, and you can almost kind of read his mind, like, am I going to have to go out and check on the player? At our most successful then, we can make sure we get a nice clean background. And I'm grateful because at CenturyLink Field, we have a sign that says, welcome to CenturyLink. We've got a little sideways rain, we have fans, we have a nice kind of cool, we see the goalposts, right? And so it all kind of came together on this photo for me. Backgrounds matter. We can't control them all the time, especially at high school. There's a high school field that I used to photograph in Seattle where there was a parking lot in the end zone, just past the end zone. No fence, just cars, white vans, station wagons, minivans, like the whole thing. So we'd always photograph the other way. Backgrounds matter, and as every photographer has pointed out this weekend, let's go back. Light matters. Find the best light. If you find cool light, okay, you can solve so many problems. We get this light coming through Seattle. Believe it or not, this is in Seattle. I know, that's sunlight, right? Like crazy. It's not cloudy gray light. We get that little beam of light early in the season because the sun doesn't go down until 9:30, and this is probably a preseason game. We get that little beam of light, and I'll just wait for someone to run through it. And I was lucky. Russell Wilson decided to scramble and get his way into the light. So we want to make sure if the opportunity presents, and sometimes it doesn't, right? We're inside at volleyball or basketball, we're outside at t-ball, okay? We want to make sure we find the light. This is a pregame photo, introductions. It used to be smoke and it used to be really cool, and then they introduced lasers, and that's a big kind of pain to photograph with, but just every once in a while it works out cool. But it doesn't have to be lasers, and it doesn't have to be beams of sunlight filtering through a shadowed fence. Sometimes it's just nice light. And I'm jealous of the people who get to photograph in California. This is at Levi's Stadium in Santa Clara, where they get light like this all the time. Dirty little secret, my professional photographer friends and I, we were disappointed that the league is still not in San Diego because that stadium had great light. And the 49ers used to play at Candlestick Park, which was a terrible stadium, but it had awesome light. You know, we're just only think we're selfish, like, it's got luxury boxes, who cares, but does it have cool light? One thing that coaches teach quarterbacks in football, raise your hand if you played football, right? They tell the quarterback, see the entire field. I don't want to lock into my receiver here, because if I just look at my receiver here, and you can tell by my build, I used to be a pro quarterback, right? If I lock into my receiver here, everyone knows where the ball is going. So they teach quarterbacks, see the entire field. As photographers, we want to see the entire field because it's really easy to get locked into where the ball is, right? Everybody's seen little kids play soccer, right? It's like bees following the ball. Wherever the ball goes, there's like 20 little kids just following it, right? And then as they get older and they learn more about soccer, then they know, like, spread out. Now the ball can kind of go anywhere. As photographers, we don't want to just concentrate on the ball all the time. We want to look around. We want to see what's going on. We want to find the human moments, and we want to keep telling those stories. This is inside a huddle of a bunch of big, sweaty men and me being, this is where my size is an advantage, right? Like, I can actually come underneath and make a photo like that. This is inside that pregame tunnel again. Kind of shows the anticipatory nature of that pregame introduction moment. And the fans don't see this, right? They only see them when they emerge from the tunnel to the thunderous roar of 70,000 people. The national anthem can be a moment. There's always places to make photos. We just want to keep looking. We want to keep looking around. We want to keep seeing, and we want to keep finding those photos. And so I take them in the pregame tunnel. I take them on the field. I take them in the team huddles. I take them in the meetings. I take them in the locker room. I take them at halftime. And every once in a while, if you keep looking around and you keep seeing the field, then something crazy happens, and even you can't explain what is going on in the photo. He's stretching, that's all that is. We talked about football and making sure that you see the entire field. If you're a baseball pitcher, what happens if you throw fastballs all the time, right? Batters time the fastball and they'll hit it. So you have to mix up your pitches. You have to have a curveball. You have to have a changeup. And you have to have a fastball. You have to have different pitches because you want to keep people guessing. In photography, what we want to make sure is that we don't shoot everything with the same lens from the same place all the time, because then it all looks the same, and then it becomes boring. If I sat in one spot with a 400mm 2.8 lens and I was 15 yards downfield at a football game, or if I was in the corner at a soccer match, or I only shot from outside third base at baseball, all of those pictures would look the same, right? Viewer fatigue, things like that, right? Like, we want to make sure, just as we moved around the field, that we use all of our pitches. Pitches in photography then comes not only down to our position, but lens choice, camera choice, where we are. This is a Nikon 14-24 on a monopod, okay, that I'm hanging over and firing via a remote. Okay, so I'm not super tall, so this picture I'm actually probably standing on a cart or a table. This picture of a huddle from on top. This picture at the Super Bowl, 14-24mm lens on the ground. Okay, as Corey talked about in his talk, the flip-up screen means I don't have to lay down in the middle of this and get in danger of getting stomped. I can put it, I can flip up the tilt screen, and I can see everything that's in front of me. Sometimes when you think it's a telephoto, it's a wide. Sometimes when you think it's a wide, it's a telephoto, right? This pass came to Tyler Locken on a 40-yard pass, and I, honest to God, thought I was grabbing my 70-200 lens, because I was like, oh my God, he threw it 40 yards. He's kind of coming right at me. So I put the one camera down and I grabbed my 70-200, except I didn't grab my 70-200. I grabbed the 24-70, and I was like, as I'm shooting, I'm like, this is completely the wrong lens. And as it turned out, I got lucky. The ball's still in flight. It's coming down, and we got it right. This is an 85mm lens, just right up in his face. And at this point of a game, he doesn't see me. He's looking right through me. And as a matter of fact, if I don't move when they release the team, I would get run over and they wouldn't think twice. They wouldn't even notice. That's the intensity. That's the environment that I find myself working in all of the time. So we want to make sure we use our lens choice. We get high. Who saw the movie? It's an old movie, and I'm really aging myself right now. Robin Williams is a college professor. Help me. What's that? When he stands on the chair, right? Remember, he stands on the chair and he looks down at all the people, and he makes every student come up and stand on the chair. And I'm not saying stand on the chair because I'm short. I'm saying stand on the chair because it gives you a different look. So when you're out there photographing soccer, hey, maybe try laying down on your tummy and shooting up if you don't have the tilt screen, or using the tilt screen, because guess what? It makes a 6-year-old soccer player look like they're playing in the World Cup. Anytime we can photograph athletes and we're down and we're looking up, it makes them more heroic. It makes them bigger. It makes them stronger. And that's kind of what we want to do. So that's why at a football game, I will always be kneeling. I will always be kneeling because I want to look up. What's the other advantage of looking up? We see under their face masks, and then we see eyes. Because a football uniform, I mean, let's admit, they're Imperial stormtroopers, right? I mean, they've got pads and gloves and uniforms and helmets, and now they all have face shields, which makes it really hard to see their eyes, right? But when we do that, when we get low and we use the right lenses and we find the right spots on the soccer field or the baseball field, we can really make them look heroic, and we can make them look bigger. And sports is about being heroes and being bigger. One of the greatest lessons I ever received in my life was from a Division III football coach. His name was Frosty Westering. May he rest in peace. A great man. He was at Pacific Lutheran University, which is outside of Seattle near Tacoma. And his mantra, he was the most successful coach, small college football coach ever. And he would tell his players, and the media would say, why don't you want to work at Division II or Division I, or why don't you want to be an assistant in the NFL? And he said, make the big time where you are. Make the big time where you are. And that is something that has stuck with me my entire career, because I worked at a newspaper and then I wanted to work at Sports Illustrated, right? But before I worked at a newspaper, I worked at a little paper, and before that I was in college. And so one of my most important lessons, one that I really want to share with you, is it doesn't matter what level you're at right now. The level you are at right now is the most important level that you have. And if you commit fully to it at that level and you treat the Little League Championship game or the state girls basketball tournament as your championship, and you stay present with it, and you work it like it's the most important event, because to the kids it is, right? To the kids it is, and our job's to tell their story, so we want to make sure that we respect that process, and the best way to respect that is to be part of it, and the best way to be part of it is to be present, and we want to make sure the big time is where we are. Here's some examples. The Olympics, Beijing, right? 2008. And we have a guy about to light the torch. He's on a wire. He's flying through the bird's nest. And this is the moment of the opening ceremonies. This is a Special Olympics opening ceremonies for the Summer Games in Seattle, Washington. Same moment. We're lighting torches. Olympics, Special Olympics. We have Usain Bolt winning gold at the Olympics. We're running the 50-meter race at the Special Olympics at JBLM in Seattle. We have Felix Hernandez throwing a fastball in front of 40,000 people on opening day for the Mariners. And we have the softball throw. Bolt wins gold. He celebrates in front of the world. And then we finish the wheelchair race. All of these moments are human, authentic, true moments that we want to capture with our cameras. We want to make sure that we are present with it. We want to make sure that we make the big time where we are, not only for ourselves, but for the athletes that we cover, and the events and the families and all the people that put all that passion into what they do. I'm fortunate enough to be a professional photographer. It is my vocation. Photography might be your avocation, it might be your hobby, but for all of us, photography is our passion. That's why we're here. That's why we're seated in this gorgeous Nikon theater. With that, I want to thank you very much for your attention, and have a great day.
And gentlemen, Rod Marr. That closes out today.